Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the School Manager Part 5. In this week's exclusive episode, I'm going to show you how to customize ID cards. In fact, I'm going to show you how you can automatically clear out all the details from a specific ID card and have them returned on one click of a button. We've also got a brand new certificates. We're going to be adding certificates and show you how to show previews on them and a whole lot more. I can't wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. We've got a really cool training this week. We're going to be finishing up these ID cards. We've got a lot more to cover on the ID cards because I want to show you how you can share and sync these ID cards among any users. And that means any change by an administrator user is going to change for those users. And we're going to save all these details and so that all you have to do, if anything gets changed or cleared out or automatically gets deleted for any reason, it will come back on the click of a button just by clicking the refresh fields. I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to click on the finish customizing. We're going to be able to group and ungroup and have everything come together. And we're going to show you some conditional formatting on those. I'm going to make the update to the classes here, which we need to do on the header there. We're going to make an update to seamlessly run these tabs across there with the code. I'm also going to add to the admin how we can add this certificate, and we got adding that. So we have a lot to cover. This is the sample. We're going to put that away because I'm going to go back into the one that we started last week, and we're going to take right up from there. So we've got a lot to cover on this. So I'm going to close that out. No need to save that one. This is the one we're going to be focused on. We've got a lot to go on this one because this is where we left off last week. But before we do, I want to make sure that you know that we do have these trainings free for you each and every Tuesday. All I ask is that you just subscribe and then go click that notification icon bell. That'll get you alerted each and every Tuesday. I bring these to you and happy to do so. And if you want to comment below, I'll be sure and respond. If you like these applications, you like developing Excel applications, I have just the program for you. I've got the Excel for Freelancers mentorship program now available, myexcelmentor.com. And what will you learn in there? You will learn a ton. Let me show you what we're developing in there. We're developing a complete accounting system, and we're going to show you how to do that. It's going to become, of course, complete with an dashboard, complete admin. You'll be able to run any report from the toolbar just like that. Of course, it'll have a complete chart of accounts, be able to enter any type of transaction, writing checks, credit card charges. We'll have a general journal, be able to make transfers, recurring transfers, reconcile account. You'll even be able to print checks with multiple different check templates here on that. We'll show you how to do that. We'll have customers in invoicing along with a really dynamic invoicing, and that goes along with same as a credit memo, even issuing credit memos to customers. Of course, we'll have customer information complete with invoice history and payment history, along with vendor information complete with purchase order and general info, items in purchasing, email automation, and a ton more. If you want to learn all that and how to make and sell your own applications, the Excel for Freelancers mentorship program is the best program to do that. All right, thanks so much. We're going to get started right now. Back into this. Okay, a few updates. We have some updates. We've got a lot of things. And this one, remember, we changed this to attendance. We changed this to classes, but I want to make sure to change this name actually to classes, right? So this tab is going to be called classes. So I want to get that done. Instead of attendance, we're going to be covering certainly in our dashboard. We'll cover a lot of reports, but classes, we have all this. So I want to make sure to change that tab. Okay, we're going to go straight into the developers. There's more things that I want to do inside the ID card. I want to add some buttons here. I'm going to increase this column a little bit so that we can add some buttons. What kind of buttons do I want to add? Well, I want to separate the ability to have customize or finish customizing. In other words, when we're customizing this ID card, we're going to have it in sort of like an edit mode where we can make changes. And then for those that do not want to make changes, or for those that maybe do not have the rights to make those changes, we can do that. So if we apply a button or a code to allow for edit mode and non-edit mode, we can then maybe those users who don't have edit rights can't edit it. It's kind of a help friendly. So what we want to do is change a mode. So why don't we set a specific cell to do just that? Like let's call it just like an edit mode here. So we'll do that. Let's say maybe on cell 99 here, since it's still within the video. I'm just going to put something called ID edit mode, ID, and then called custom mode. And that's going to be basically true or false. We'll just have it Boolean and we'll start it out as true. And so what I want there is basically it's when we put it into edit mode, it's going to automatically have things available that aren't available when they're, so they'll be able to edit those specific things. And also what I want to do is when I change this to none, I don't want any fields to show up, in this case the picture. When I have labels and values, when I make changes here, I want those changes to reflect here on the card. So if I say value only, the first name will go away and it'll only show the actual name. So I want this to be dynamic and based on that. Last week we created these fields, but what I want to do now is I want to make sure that these fields and their position and all the information gets saved somewhere. And the reason we want to save that, all that information somewhere, is that when multiple users gets that, they can basically create these ID cards dynamically, pretty much just running a macro. So that means if the administrator decides to move this over here, automatically when a user gets that, they're going to be able to just click refresh and it will update automatically. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to do that with a few buttons. So I'll insert the buttons right now. In fact, I'll just use this format here. So I'm just going to copy this update button and just place it here. And so what I want with that is I want to have two buttons really, one called finish customizing and one called customize. So customize ID card. So we'll call this finish customizing. When they're done customizing, we'll give it probably a width of, let's say 1.4, something like that. And then I'll right justify it and make sure it's right justified. All right, it is. Okay, good. So that's what I want to do. And a little bit more on that one, maybe 1.55. I've got a bit of an icon there, and I'll increase this a little bit. Okay, so now back to 1.55. And we'll go ahead and set those to size. And I also want another one. I'm going to duplicate that, Control D, and I'm going to call Edit ID Card. Edit ID Card. So that's going to help us there. So we have both of those fields, and I'm going to want some icons on that, but I'll take care of that. I want another one. I'm going to delete that one called Print ID Card. We want to be able to print it. And I also want to have another one called refresh field. So I'm going to duplicate that and call this refresh fields. And that's going to be able to take all that information from our database and basically recreate it just how I showed you on the sample. So these particular three, we can size them accordingly. Maybe just 1 inch is enough for those. 1.2. Let's try to make them the same. Okay, so once we have this, I want to put some icons on there. I'm going to assign the macro, or actually I'm going to clear the macro from that. We're not ready to put a macro on that yet. Okay, so I'm going to bring in some different icons. So I'm going to insert, I've got some saved up. It's going to make it helpful for us. And so let's put them up here. So I've got, let's see, I'll pull all these up. I think we're going to need all of those, and click insert. And then I'm going to size them to about 0.22. That's going to size them accordingly. And now we're ready to place those icons. So finish customizing. It's kind of hard to see. That's going to be the edit ID card. This is going to be the finish card, and this is going to be the print one. And then we have the refresh. I'll make the refresh a little bit smaller too. So 0.2 on that. That one's a little bit bigger. Okay, so we're good to go on that. That's actually, I'd make it even smaller, 0.19. Okay, so I'm going to make this button a little bit bigger because it doesn't have it. And then we'll go let's see on this button here. Format 0.13, 1.3 should cover it. Okay, I like that better. So now what we want to do is I'm just going to group these and just give them some names. And I want to use some specific names. That's very, very important. And then I'm going to group those. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to align them in the middle here and then group them. And I'm going to do the same thing for each icon here as we do before if you're following me. And then finish icon. I'm going to do that too. Now I'm going to probably take off all the macros on this. I know some still have macros assigned because I duplicated them. I really don't want that. I don't want any macros assigned, so I'm just going to clear in case we accidentally click a button. Just clearing those out, we'll assign it. Okay, so the edit ID card and the finish customizing, those are going to be over on top of each other. In other words, we're only going to show one. And I want to make sure that each one of these contain a specific name, a clear name that is unlike anything else and also contains the words ID card. So let's call this one called finish ID card, finish custom ID card. Each one of those are going to have the word ID card in it because I'm going to need to group these. I want to group these, and I want distinct qualities on each one of these within their name so that I don't group all the shapes in the sheet. I only group those that concern ID card. So that I'm going to use that ID card. So this we're going to call edit ID card. And then also we're going to have print ID card, because you can imagine. So each one's going to contain that. And that's going to become helpful a little bit later, print ID card. And then the last thing, refresh field ID card. We'll just call that refresh field ID card. Okay, so that's important. I also want to do the same thing here. I want to add some top. Also, let's call this, we're going to call this front top ID card. and we're going to call this back top ID card, just also back top ID card. And then I want to do the same thing with borders, because when we group them, they all must have the same name. So that we'll call this front ID card, and then we'll call this back ID card. That should be sufficient enough so that we can then group back ID card. Good. So I like that the way it is there. So they're all named accordingly. So they each have a, and then again, the edit and the customize, I want to put those. And on the top, these two here, I want these to be the same. I want them to be aligned horizontally on the top. So I'm going to move them up because they're going to be placed directly over. So we have two buttons here. If we open up the shapes command, we can see that the two buttons here are refresh, print ID, finish custom ID, and edit ID card. So they all have the word ID card in them, and that's very, very important. Okay, so then print ID and refresh fields, they can just move up here, and then we'll center everything accordingly here. All right, good. So we've got our ID cards. That's going to really help us. Let's write some macros that are going to help us do some of the functionality that we get these completed. I can zoom out a little bit. We don't need to zoom in all the way now. So into the VBA, we're going to go inside the Visual Basic, and we're going to be heading over to, of course, the student ID card macros. Now, last training, we went from 10 to 101, so that's why we had a lot of different fields. I've just corrected that, if you'll notice that. That was just a little issue we had, but basically we went, instead of 101, it said 10, so keep that in mind. All right, I saw that during the video. I was like, oh no. Okay. So what do we want to do? Well, the first thing what I want to do is I want to go into customizing mode. I want to do a few things. Let's write a macro called student ID customize, where we're going to actually go into the customization mode. So sub student ID card and then customize. All right, and within this, what we want to do, I want to focus, of course, on the student sheet. So that's what we're going to focus. So with students, that's the sheet we're going to focus on. Notice that end with, that's auto hotkey. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to have a specific group, a group of all those shapes grouped together. And if that group exists, I want to ungroup it, right? So the best way to do that when we're customizing is to ungroup it. So dot shapes, and it won't exist until we create it. Student, we'll call this student ID group, and then dot ungroup. So we're going to ungroup it, and if it doesn't exist, it would create an error. So we do need to wrap it in on error, resume next, and on error go to 0. Okay, so also I want to set, remember we had B99. That's going to be we're going to set this B99 to true. We know what we're going to, and we're going to add some conditional formatting in here as you saw in the sample. So let's do that. So dot range B99 equals true. Edit, I'm going to put that edit mode to true. Okay, once it is true, what else do I want to do? I want to basically show the finish button. This button here, I want to show the one that says finish customizing, finish custom ID card. I want to show that, and I want to hide the edit custom ID card. So I want to hide that. So let's just take a look at these buttons so we get your name. So I want to show the finish custom ID card, and I want to hide the edit ID card shapes. So let's write that in right now. So dot shapes finish, let's bring this down so we can see both at the same time. That's always helpful. And then okay, good, there we go. So now we can see our buttons, so we can see everything. We can bring this up, and we can continue with our code here. So finish, see, now we can see the shape, so we know finish customer ID card dot visible equals, and so true, right? We want to make it visible. Show the finish button, show finish button, and we want to hide the edit button. Dot shapes, and then the edit button there is of course called edit ID card. Edit ID card dot visible equals MSO false. We're going to be hiding that. Hide edit. Okay. All right, so now that we've hidden that, what else do we want to do? I also want to make sure that we're going to be locking some fields, right? If we're not in edit mode, I want to make sure to lock these fields. These are formulas. This is always going to be locked, right? But the users are going to have editability on this, but I want to lock those fields. So all the way from E101 all the way to F120, we're going to lock those fields. So that way, once the sheet is protected, they're not going to be able to edit those. So let's do that. Dot range E101 all the way through F119. Let's make sure we got the rows right. F11, let's go 120 actually on that. 120, we want to lock those. So 120, and how do we lock those? It's not going to be value. It's going to be locked equals, of course, false in this case because we're in the customization mode. Locked, dot locked equals false, right? And then of course, once we go out of the customization, we'll go ahead and lock those and it'll be true. That's all we're going to be doing as far as the customization, as far as inside the custom ID card customize. So when we run that there, all we're going to see is that button disappear. Let's close that. Now we have the finish customizing. This button should be a little bit bigger inside. And so that's it. So that's all we need. Once we have that there, we can then easily then get into the edit mode. Okay, well, let's add some conditional formatting in a bit too. So we've got this. So what are we going to do once we're in the edit mode? Now that everything's unlocked, we're going to be able to save those, but let's focus on the finish. Once we're finished customizing, what do I want to do? When I'm finished with this, I want to make sure that everything gets saved exactly where it's at, right? I want to be able to make sure that all those fields exactly where I've placed them are going to stay there in case there's any changes. I want to make sure that everything doesn't move or doesn't change. So how can we ensure that that's not going to happen? Well, what we can do is we can line those up and we can save the information all the way. And how are we going to do that? We can save it with some kind of a table. So we want to, this is in Excel, so we might as well save that information inside a table. Well, where's the table? Why don't we put it somewhere? Why don't we put that information somewhere? Let's go ahead and put it all the way over here. I want to save all of that information. Let's say starting on, let's reduce these down to nothing here. I'm going to do the same thing for this because we don't need all this extra space here. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to start at, I want the rows to be the same. In other words, if I make a change to 101, I want that information to save 101 here in BA. So I'm going to put the information here. And what do I want to save? Well, I want to save two different things. I want to save one, the field value, and I want to, the labels, and I want to save the values, right? We have really two different, sometimes we're going to show, like in this case, the labels, and sometimes we're going to show the values. So I need to save each one of those. So we'll have two different sections, one for the labels and one for the values. So we'll start out with the field labels. So I'm going to put the field labels up here, the main title called field, and this will be hidden. Nobody will see this, field labels. And then what I want to do is I want to put, what do I want to save? I want to save the left position. Okay. I also want to save the top position. And I want to know the width of the shape. Once we save it, we can recreate it. I also want to know the height of it. And I want to know the font. I want to know the font size. I want to know the font color. And I want to know the back color. In case we want to change the back color, we can save that too. That should be sufficient. Now, keep in mind that the picture itself will only have these. The picture, we will have to make some checks in the code to make sure that the picture, we don't have this information for the picture. But this is enough. So this is our field label. So we can merge and center this one here. And that's going to cover, we'll just give it some little bit of a color, but it's really not too important in this case. Let's drop this down here. But I just want to notate that, these are admin and nobody will see that. Once we have that, we can then, so that's good for the field labels, but what about the values? We need the values too. I want to save those. So we can save those somewhere else too. Why don't we, to make it easier, let's use CA. So I'm going to just go all the way over here and then I'm going to shrink those columns down all the way, or just almost hide them, but shrink them down way a lot. And then, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in CA, I'm going to put this, but this one's going to be the field values. And so we're going to do the same thing, everything. We're going to simply save all the information here. So now we know where we're going to save it. So for example, if I want to know the left position, here is a, let's say, student ID. This is a student label in row 105. So in 105 of that label right here, I'm going to put all the left position of that. I'm going to put the top position, the width, and I'm going to have VBA do it all for us. Once it's saved in this table, like you saw before, once I delete everything, all I need to do is push a button and it'll recreate everything automatically because we have a sample shape. We can take this sample shape and we can recreate every field based on this, based on all of our data. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's write some code to do just that, saving our work. And we're going to go in and we're going to write a brand new macro. And this macro is going to be called student ID card, finish customizing it, because when they're finished customizing it, it is at that point that I want to save all of those changes into the table. So sub student, in this case, ID card finish customizing. Okay, kind of a long macro name, but that's okay. So what I want to do is I want to dimension the shape. Let me make sure that I've got some shapes. I think that's sufficient. I'm going to dimension here the shape group as a variant, because we're going to need to group these shapes. So it's going to be as a variant. And also I want to dimension the shape array, since we're going to need to group all those shapes into an array, their names. So we're going to need that here, shape array as a string. Now we've already dimensioned other things up here. Hopefully at the top, I've got a bunch of things, field row, Okay, field shape, we're going to be using these two, but these are fine up here. But these are specific to this macro, so I want to make sure that we have those. Shape group as a variant, shape array as a string, and this is going to be array, so we're going to put the parentheses around there like that. Okay, so now that we have that, now what I want to do is I want to, first of all, I'm going to turn off application screen updating. This is going to run a little bit slower, so we need to make it a little bit faster. So application dot screen updating equals false. And before the macro ends, we're going to make it true. So application dot screen updating equals true. Now we're going to write everything in between. We can turn off calculations, but there's not a lot of formulas in here, so that's fine. Not false, true. Okay, true. Inside there, we're going to write all the code. So what do we want to do? The first thing what I want to do is focus on with that student sheet, with students sheet. That's the one we're going to focus on. Dot, make sure, just adding the dot, make sure I got the name right, but I noted it. So the first thing is I want to ungroup. Remember we had a group with student groups. I want to ungroup this, but if for some reason, if it doesn't exist, it's going to create an error. So again, I'm going to copy this and paste it down here. I'm going to ungroup that. By the end of this macro, we're going to write another macro. We're going to add it in to group them. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to go through all of the shapes inside the sheet. But those shapes are very specific. Notice, first of all, keep this in mind. This one have the words ID card, but everything in here has ID card and the underscore. So I need to differentiate between every single field, ID card and the underscore. ID card and the underscore. So that's contained with both the values and the labels. Both have that. So that's what we're going to work with. So that's those shapes, only those shapes that I want to work with. So for each field shape, in dot shapes, that's all the shapes within the sheet, and then we're going to close our loop. Next field shape, and we're going to work with all those shapes. First of all, I need to make sure that we set a field row. So what is that field row going to be? The good thing is because we've started out at 100 conveniently, kind of luckily, I know that the last three digits of every single shape is going to be the row number automatically because we're in the 3-digit area. So we can just extract that row number from the shape using the left command. So let's do that. We know the row that it's going to be placed on, right? We need to know the row where we're going to save this information. What row is it going to be? 101, 102. So based on the shape type, we know the row here. It's going to be, in this case, 105. So why don't we write that out? Let's extract that field row. Make sure that we have that as a, I believe that we have that as a field row. Good, we have that as a variable, a long variable. So let's do that. So what's the field row? Field row is going to be equal to, and we're going to use the right command, right? I want the last 3 digits. Field shape dot name, the name of that shape, and I want only the last 3 digits. That's going to get us our row. Field row. So now we know the row, so now we're just ready to move on to the next. So what are we going to be doing next? Now I want to check to make sure to see what is that, what if it contains a label, does it contain things, and I want to continue on, but first I want to make sure it contains that ID card and the underscore. So those are the only ones we're going to focus on right now. So if in string, I'm going to use the in string command. What is the, we're going to use the field shape name. We're focused on that name, and if it contains ID card and the underscore, that's distinct about every single field. If that's greater than 0, then we're going to continue. And if so, everything's going to be in here. Everything, right? We're only focused on those shapes, okay? Only on those ID card shapes. But now we want to drill down a little bit further. Now we know that they contain ID cards, but we've got labels, we've got a picture in there, and we've got values in there. So we need to differentiate between those types, right? Why do we need that? Because we know that our field labels are going to go in this section, our field values are going to go in this section. So we need to differentiate between those. So why don't we do that now with just a little bit of code that we're going to write. Okay, continuing on. So if the in string, again, we're going to use in string field shape dot name. This case, if it contains label, that's the one I want to start. Label, then what do we want to do? Greater than 0, that means it's contained. Then we're going to set the field column, right? I want to know the field column, right? We know the row, but we got to know the row. How do we know what column? I want to know what starting column. What is this? The labels, what column is this? Well, that's column 53. What's column with this 26th grade? Of course, that is, of course, column 79. So I know that if it's a label, our starting column is on 53. And if it's a value, it's going to start on 79. So having that information, we can set that row then. So if the label in-string label column is greater than 0, it means it's a label, then what we're going to do is we're going to set the field column is equal to 53. Else, of course, the field column is equal to 79. Okay, that's going to set the column. And we always, anytime we place data, we need three things: the sheet, the field, the row, and the column. Now we know what sheet, we know what row, and we know what column. Now we can work with it. Now we have all the information that we need to place that information in. Okay, so we know that. So now we're going to ready to set up. So what is the left position? So if it's labeled this, so the left position is going to be basically the row, the cell, and that. But I don't want to just put the left position this. I want to put the left position based on a specific cell. That specific cell is going to be I-102. Everything's going to be based on I-102. So how far from the right is it? And we use the left command to do that. So that's what we'll do. So dot cells, we're going to use dot cells in this case because we're both our row and our column are dynamic. So the field row, comma, field column dot value equals field shape dot left, right? The left position, but it's not the full left position. It's minus the left position of the left position of minus dot range. Again, I-102, 102 dot left. So it's minus the left position of that cell. So we're subtracting. So I want to know the difference. For example, I want to know the difference between this position and the left position. I also want to know the difference between the top position, so that when we place them back in there, we're going to figure out whatever I-102 to the left is and place it to the right of that, or place it below the top. So we're going to use the top left cell to do just that. That's going to be our guide. So next up, we're pretty much going to just copy this. Let's just put that in the left position. And now I want to just paste that in here. Let's go ahead and paste. We'll just add that, copy that, and then we'll just put it in the top. But this time we're not focused on the field column, right? Our field column here is 53, but in this case it's 54. So I need to add 1 to the field column for that. So let's add 1. Field column plus 1 is not going to be, now we're not focused on the top position. We're focused on the top position based on the shape and based on the cell. So now we got to change this to top position, topo, and then top here. So that's going to get us our both top position from range I-102. That's what I want. Now all we need is the width and the height. So we can just copy this, and of course we know now that it's not going to be in this cell, it's going to be +2. That the next one, of course, let's take a look in here, is our width, and after our width comes our height. So let's add that in here. Dollar equals, and in this case all we need to do is field shape dot width. We want to know the width of it. So once we have the width, the next thing is we want a height. So that's the width. Let's just put that in. It's all self-explanatory. The value equals, I'll fix the column in just a second, field shape dot height. Okay, that's the height. And we know that in this case it is going to be field column +3. Okay, so there's our first 4 columns. We've got the left position, we've got the top position based on I-102, we have the width, and we have the height. Now what I want to do is, now I want to make sure that we're going to add in the rest. I want to put in the font size, the font color, and the back color. I want to put all that in. But I do need to run a check because that information is not going to be put in on a picture, right? We're not adding that information, and pictures don't handle that. They handle the top with the rest of them, but not the continuing, not the following 4 conditions. So we need to run an if statement. If in string, we know from from our naming that our picture contains this word PIC. So anything that contains PIC, I know not to include. So let's use that as our check. So let's take a look. If in string, again, field shape dot name. Of course, we could name this as a variable too. It would be a little quicker. But pic, if it contains pic, or we can put does not. In this case, in string picture, what we're looking for, I want to make sure it equals 0. Then we continue on the following. So then we continue on with these only if it does not contain pic, because a picture would not use these. Of course, that's the font, the shape, and so 4, right? 4, what's 4 in our column? 4, we're looking for Now we've got the font size, the font color, and the back color. So now we have all 4 of those to add in, of course not for the picture. So we're going to do that just right now. So for dot value, what's going to be in that? In that case, we're going to put the font name. So equals, in this case, field shape dot text frame. We want to focus on the text frame 2 dot text range dot font dot name. That's going to set us a set the font name. I also want the font size, but let's copy that. And then we'll just paste it down there and we'll get the font size. We'll make a few small changes. Of course, it's going to be column 5 that we want that in. And we also want font name. In this case, we're going to focus on the font size. So dot size is what we're focused on. That's the font size. I also want the color too. The color. So I'm going to paste that in here. Again, in column 6, and I'm going to do one more thing. Let's see, 6, and then I also want to do 7 is going to be our last one here. 7. Okay, now we just need to update. So I want the font color, that's right, color. And I also want the back color, So what would that be? What would the font color be? Well, the font color would be something like text range, but not font name. So it would be text range characters dot font dot fill dot forecolor dot RGB. I want the RGB of that. That's going to be our font color. Actually, got that wrong. Let's do that right up here. That's the one I want, font here, and we'll update that. So characters of font fill. Okay, but what about the backfill? This is going to be the backfill of that shape. So what do I want that? It's going to be the field shape, in this case, filled. Then what do we want? Then I want to know the forecolor of that fill, and then I want to know if it's RGB or not. So RGB. That's it for the back color, and that's going to be the 7th column. Okay, so now we've saved all of that information in. Okay, perfect. Okay, that's it. So now we can close up our loop, making sure we've got all of our 2 end ifs. That's correct. So we've got the end if here based on the picture. We've got an end if based on it is an ID card, and we've got our next loop, and then we have our next loop. So everything's lining up just right. Okay, so what do we want to do now? Again, I want to set being that now we're in edit mode, so now we're finishing up edit mode, I should say. So we're going to change dot range B99. I want to make that false. No longer in edit mode equals false. And then also what I want to do is I want to update these 2 things. These 2 buttons here, I want to reverse these. So we're going to show them and hide them. So I'm going to paste those in here. In this case, our finish ID card, this is going to be false. So I'm going to hide that. We're now finished with it, so we don't need to show that. But I want to show the edit button in case we want to edit again. So see true, showing that edit button. What else do we want to do? Once we have that, I also want to, again, lock these. So now we're going to be locking these equals true. So I'm going to copy this one, and I want to lock these fields and paste that down here equals true. So now we're going to lock the field. Okay, great. So all I really need to do now what I want to do is I want to group all these shapes. And it's really important to group everything. Not only group these, I want to group the buttons as well, because when I switch tabs, I want this whole group to be hidden. So it's very, very important that we switch those so that we group all the shapes. Anything that has the word ID card in it, anything, we're going to group. So how do we do that? Well, let's go ahead and do that. We're going to focus on those shapes. Again, let's create another shape called ID shape. Let's do that right here in the beginning of this macro here. So we're going to dimension the ID shape as shape. Okay, so we're going to so now we can focus on the ID. It's nice to have them separate. So again, for each ID shape in dot shapes, we're still within the sheet. Close our loop, next ID shape. So what do we want to do with these? Well, basically I want to get all the names of those shapes and I want to put them in a string. And then what I want to do is split that, create an array, and then group them. I'm going to show you just how we do that because I know that's a lot of information to handle. So if, first of all, I want to know, is it contain the word ID? So if, again, we're going to use that in string, what is the name? ID shape dot name. This one, we're just going to focus on ID card, not the underscore, because everything we want to include the buttons. ID card is greater than 0. That means it is. And I want to make sure that it's visible, just to check to make sure it's visible. But we may not need the visible part. Let's keep that out of it. So then what do we want to do? Then I want to basically group it. But I want to add it to a string. So how can we do that? Let's add a string to that. Let's make sure we have it shape group. I want to add the shape group. It's a variant. That's a string variant. We can use that. So the shape group, is going to equal the shape group and what else? And the ID shape dot name, the name of it, dot name, and I need to add a comma, a delimiter, so that I can separate though, and the comma. We did this before, very similar inside the icons last week, if you remember. Now it's a little bit of a review, but a little bit different. So there we go. So now what we're doing is we're going to add all those. So we're just going to keep that there. That's all we need to do. We could put this in one line here pretty much. There we go. We don't need the end if then put the space here, then the shape group equals. Okay, so that's all we need to do. We're just basically taking all of the shapes that contain and putting it in a string and separating it. But now one of the issues is we're going to end up with a comma at the end, and I really don't want that. So I need to remove that last comma at the end. So how do we do that? So the shape group is equal to, again, we're going to use the left again. We've been used right before, now we're using left. The shape group, this is the string that we're going to focus on, and I want to know the length of the entire one, the length. We're going to use n of the shape group, and I want to subtract 1. We're going to remove that. We're going to basically, we want it equals to everything but the last character, pretty much everything but the last character, and that's how you remove the last character. So that's all we have to do. That's going to remove it. So once I have that last comma removed, I'm just going to put that in here. Remove last comma. Okay, because we don't need that. Once we have that, we're ready to move on. So that we're going to set the shape array now. So the shape array is going to be equal to, we need to split them. Splitting them based on that comma. So we're going to split the shape group based on what? Based on that delimiter, which is that comma. That's going to split everything. Now, once we have it in a split, now what we can do is we can group them based on that array. So let's do that with students dot shapes dot range shape array. That's the one we're focusing on. Shape array dot group. So now what are we going to do? We're going to group it end with. We got the end with there. So first thing what I want to do is I want to give it a name. So dot name. That name is going to be look familiar to because it's that student group that we've grouped it. Student group. And also what I want to do is I want to make sure the placement is, I want to set the placement. Move but don't size with cells. So equals XL move. That way it's not going to size with cells. That's important because we don't want it changing. Okay, very, very good. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to save our work here and then get rid of the extra spaces here. Save it before running it always. And then what we'll do is we're going to run that macro, check for any bugs, field column, variable not defined, and field column. I thought I had that defined up here. Let's see what we did up here. Nope, not field row. Okay, field column as long. Very important. Okay, continuing on. We may use it for more than one macro, so I'm putting it up there. Click OK. Rerun there. Check for any bugs. Type mismatch field shape.name. Okay, well, in this case, what we want to do is I want to make sure that we need to put this. So take a look at this. Look at the shape name that's over. If we hover over this, we see that it's on rectangle 4, right? Well, we really want this field row once we've made sure that it is actually a specific ID card. So it was running it for all shapes, and I really don't want that. So we want to check first that it's an ID card, making sure, because only those ID card specific shapes have that number at the bottom. So that's fine. Run that, and then take a look in here. Okay, rerun the macro. Any other bugs? Take a look. Take a look at this picture value. Okay, well, let's go ahead and assign a row to that shape too. I think that's important. So let's go ahead and put in this picture value. I want to put a row on that. I think that's kind of good if we have the row 101. So everything should have the row. Picture value have the row. So we'll make sure that we add that in there. Picture value, good. Okay, so now we've got that. Let's continue on here. Okay, that looks good. Everything worked out well. Let's take a look inside. We have our information. All of our information is now stored in here just the way we like it. Very, very cool. Okay, everything got saved. Everything, and let's take a look at our grouping. We now have our group. Our group is perfect. I don't necessarily, we now line this up a little bit better, but everything looks good because it's all grouped together just the way I want it, because when I switch tabs, I'm going to need to hide this group. It's called the student group. And then we'll click. Now what we'll do is we'll assign the macro. I'm going to hold down the control, and then on right click on the assign macro, and then we're going to go into the student ID card, and then this one called customize, and click there. And then edit the ID card. We'll debug that. Let's take a look. Finish ID card. I think that name is correct. Okay, in this one, we need to make sure that we change that to student ID group. Student ID group here is the one we ungrouped, student ID group. So we need to make sure to name that the right, not student group, but student ID group. We need the same name that we've assigned. So that's fine. We'll rerun this here. And then, of course, it wasn't found. That's fine. Because it's the reason, why isn't it not found? Because it's grouped. So all we need to do is just ungroup this here initially and then rerun it again. And it'll work just fine. Okay. But we should want to add it student ID group. Make sure we're ungrouping that. And then run it again. Okay, that looks good. Now it's grouped, making sure we've got the right name, student ID group. Edit the group, finish customizing. Okay, good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign the macro to this, the one that we just created, under student ID group, finish customizing. Click OK. Saving our work here, finish customizing. Okay, good. So what I want to do now is I want to be able to refresh the fields. I want to refresh all these fields based on a specific, based on all this data. That means this data here. So that means these fields get created or placed or both based on all this data here. So how can we do that inside another macro? So let's write that right now. Okay, so moving on down, let's go down here. That's going to be the next one. Now we've got the student finish customizing, student ID refresh. So we're going to call this student sub student and then ID card and then refresh. Okay, so basically what we want to do is I want to pull all of that data and create those shapes or sizes. If they're already created, simply place those shapes accordingly or just make them visible. So we're going to focus on with the students. With students is where our focus is going to be. And also I want to get the last row. Again, we're going to loop through all the rows because I want to know. So I want to know the last row based on 120. So let's get that last row. Let's see if we have that in here, making sure that we have that variable here. Let's put it in here. Dimension the last row is long, so we can do that. Up here, we're going to need that variable. Dimension the last row as long. And I also want to make sure the field row, we've got this field row already, so that's fine. Dimension up there. So with the students, the last row is going to be equal to where? It's going to be based, of course, on column E. So let's focus E, and then we're not going to need that many. E, 999, and LX. So that's going to get us the last row, really 120, not going to be much more than that. So once we have the last row, we can then loop through the last row. So for the field row is going to be equal to, starting on 101, to the last row. And also close your loop, next field row. Everything's going to go in between here. Once we have that, what I want to do is I want to differentiate. I want to know if it's 101. 101 is going to be a little bit different because that's our picture. So if the row is 101, then we need to do a few different things with that one. So if the field row equals 101, and I want to make sure that they've chosen to use the values, and dot range that they've chosen to show the picture, E101 does not equal none, right? That means they don't want to show the picture. So if they don't want to show the picture, there's nothing we can do. Then what do we want to do? Then also what I want to do is I want to make sure that that picture, check to see if it exists. Does it exist? If not, we have to make it. So how do we know if it exists? So we've given it a specific name, right? We've given it this name here, this picture right here, ID card picked value. So I'm just going to copy that name that we've gone, and we're going to take a look, and we're going to set it to a shape. So we're going to set the field shape is going to be equal to dot shapes. Then we're going to paste in that name, and then but if it doesn't, it's going to create an error. So we need to wrap it on error, resume next, and also on error go to 0 below that. So that way we can then check. So now what we want to do is we want to just double check that. If the field shape is nothing, and I want to make sure also, not only is nothing, I want to make sure the directory of whatever is in, make sure that file path is correct. I can't create the picture unless I know that G101 is correct. So let's double check that. And dot range G101, that value dot VB directory. I'm going to check the directory. Does it an actual file path? Making sure that is correct. Then we know it's red. Does not equal empty, making sure it doesn't equal empty, making sure there's an active directory. So if both those are true, the user has decided it doesn't exist, right? And the path is valid, then what we want to do is I want to create it. So how do we do that then? Dot pictures, dot insert. What are we inserting? I'm going to insert that picture path in G101. Dot range, G101. Dot value. That's the picture we're going to insert. I'm going to give it a specific name. Dot name. And what name is that going to be? Of course, that name is going to be right here. ID card 101 here. That's what I want to call it. dot name equals picture value 101. Okay, so now basically all we've done is we just checked for the picture. If it doesn't exist, we created it and we made sure there's a valid directory before we create it. Okay, moving on. Now that we know that it exists, created, what we want to do is we can then set the picture. We know that set the picture. So if the field shape, we can do that right here. Then obviously we need the then state. So once we have that, then what we're ready to do is then what we can do is we can then set that. We might as well set it to this now. So then we can do it again. Now that we know it exists, we can set the field shape. So now we can work with the field shape in case it is. How do we do that? So if field shape is nothing, now what we can do is focus on that. So with field shape, we can work with it. So what do we want to do with this particular shape? I want to set the left position, dot left equals students dot range I102 dot left, the left position plus also students dot range, again CA, in this case we know it's already CA and 102, and the field row, you could use field row because that way we can repeat it, and the field row, we've already specified that, dot value. So we're going to based on that, it's not be equals plus, right? We're plussing it. Plus, okay, plus. So that's the left position of the picture, left. And now all we need to do is just copy that pretty much and then paste it for the picture for the top position and update the top position. So continuing on now the left, now the top position, we just have to change this to top. And we know in CB is our top position, and this is going to be from the top of 102, top. Okay, so that's it. So what about our width? Well, our width is basically going to be just that. The dot width of our picture is going to be basically in CC. So this is the top, and then CC is going to be our width, and then our height, of course, equals what's in CC. That's going to be our width. Call that width. Our width. Yes, there we go. And then last, there's our height. Dot height. Height is going to be equal to, of course, CD. And that's it for the picture because the picture doesn't have anything else. So that's going to be the height. Great. So that's all we're going to need to do with the picture. That's going to place it directly exactly where we want to place it. And lastly, we just need to make sure it's visible. Dot visible equals MSO true. Okay, now that's it. That's all we need to do for the picture. Now we can focus on the field shape. But I want to set that field shape to nothing for sure. So let's just do that. I'm going to copy this. And last thing, set field shape, in this case, equal to nothing. So once we have that, we can clear that out. And now we're going to focus on the field labels. That was just for the picture. And the field label is going to be somewhat simpler. So all we need to do is if dot range E, so we're looping down now, E and the field row dot value equals, in this case, labels, and we can copy it just to make sure. Sometimes it's good to just copy it exactly this way. Labels and values. So this is what I want to copy. Escape out of there. Go back into the VBA. Labels, especially with my typing, it's probably really important. Labels and values. Then we need to add a field label. Then add the field label. And if, make sure I check that end if. Okay, end if. Okay, because we're still inside the if statement for this one right here. Okay, this one goes up, that one goes end if. This is end if it's a picture, so we need to bring this up here. That's the end if it's a picture. Remember, we had if it's a picture here, this if statement right here, if it's 101, then we're going to continue on with that with, and then end if. Now we're focused on the field labels. Okay, continuing on that, make sure it's always clear and always close your loop so it's easier. So if we're focused on field labels now, so what are we going to do there? So we're going to check to see if it exists, right? So again, on air resume next. And then I want to say dot set, the field shape is going to be equal to dot shapes ID card, in this case label, and we'll be, after this we can just copy paste, it'll be real easy, and the field row, and the field row. So now we're just checking. So you're going to set it and then on air go to 0. So all we want to do is really check that if it exists. If it doesn't exist, we do need to create it. So if the field shape is nothing, then what do we want to do? Then I need to create it. So let's do that right now. So we're going to take, how do we create it? We're going to take our sample here, our sample field, and just create it from that. So dot shapes, sample ID field, dot duplicate, dot name equals, then all we need to do is just give it that exact name that we have it up here. We want to make sure it's got the name here. Here's the name that we want to assign. So that's it. Just paste that down in here. That's going to give it the specific name that we want. Okay, so now what we want to do is all we need to do is just, again, set that. Now that we have it, we don't want to set the field shape. We can set it once more, set that, then we can work with it again. Now it's been set, and now we can continue on with our code. So we can work with, now we're going to work with the field shape. So with field shape, and we're going to do a bunch of things with this. Well, first of all, of course, we want to set, in this case, I want to focus on the drawing object. I want to assign it a formula. These labels going to have a formula. What formula is going to be concerned? I want to make sure that it has the right formula. These labels have to have a formula that's located like F in 105, F in whatever the row they're in. So let's assign that formula right now to make sure. So dot drawing objects dot formula is going to be equal to what? Equals, again, we're going to make it absolute F, and of course the field row. That's going to assign it that automatic, and don't forget the and sign, Randy. Okay, there we go. Now we got the and sign. So it's going to give it that formula. We need to make sure it's got that formula. Next up, we want to set the left position dot left. Of course, that's going to be equal to BA. This time we're focused on BA. So pretty much all we need to do is just kind of copy this here and then make some updates on that. So I'm going to make those updates on that. It'll be a little bit faster. Okay, dot left equals students 102, but BA, right? The BA is the left position. My plus, there's a plus in there. I need to add that plus up here. Make sure it's put up there. Dot left plus, everything's correct here. Okay, so the left position is the students 102 plus BA plus the top positions plus BB. The width is BC and the height is BD. And now all we have to do is simply set the font name, the size, and that. So we have that information up here. Let's go ahead and just copy that here. And then I'm going to modify it accordingly, of course. And then just going to paste it down here. Now that's not going to work, obviously, until then. So let's go ahead and just, basically we're going to focus on, we're already on the field shape. So let's just clear that out. And I'll make the updates, a lot of updates here. Clearing that out, just deleting that basically, and then I'm going to reverse them. So we really want to focus on in this case, the font name. So here's the font name of our text frame. I'm going to move that over here, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the font size here. Don't worry about the red. I'm going to fix that up. Then we'll just paste in the cells that we want. Okay. All right. So then we also got the RGB because it takes a while to type this out. So dragging this over here, and then we'll make everything perfectly nice and fit. Okay, so now that we have this, obviously we're not going to focus on cells, so we don't need that, but I do want to focus on, let's say it's going to be BE, BF, and BF. So let's copy this here, and then we'll paste it in. You'll see how quickly that works. Okay, set the font name here. It's going to be something like that, and then we're going to update those columns in a moment there. Font size here, and then we're going to set, of course, we need to have the, let's say the font color and then the back color here. So let's put that in here. Okay, now we just need to update. So BD, BE, F, and I'll go over this with you in a moment, G, and we'll double check it, and H. Okay, so we've got here the text frame. Let's update that so I can see everything. I want everything nice and even. Tab it over. Okay, so we got the drawing object. The text frame 2 of this shape is going to be equal to whatever's in BE in the field row. The students is going to be everything in whatever's in BF, that font size. The font color is going to come from BG, the font color. And of course, lastly, the back color is going to come from BH, and that's the fill 4 color. So we've got everything there. Let's go ahead and save our work. Now all we need to do is, that covers labels, but all we need to do is pretty much copy and paste that and use that for our values. The only thing we need to make sure of is we're going to actually make sure to display it. So last thing dot visible equals, so true. Okay, so now that we've made it visible, end with an end if, that is the end of our labels, so we can clear that out. And now we're going to focus on the values. So again, what I want to do is just copy this. This is going to be, and then paste it down here. And then go skip a little bit, paste it down here, and then we're going to go up. This is field values. We're focused on, in this case, of course, if it's not values, we're going to focus on values only. Or, so it can be either one, either field labels and values or values only. So going to put in this, copy this, either one, remember? So what does that mean? Let's say put in or. I'll put in or, and then I'm going to change it to values. In this case, what would be values only. So clear this out. So either for any option, either for labels and values or values only, we want to show those values. That means here, anytime E is, whether E is values only or whether it's labels of values, we want to show that value. I want to show it. Okay, but this time it's a little bit different. So again, let's focus on this, labels and values, or E equals values only. Then we're going to set the field shape. This time, of course, it's not going to be label. It's going to be continued value, right? Remember, all of our shape values end with the word value. They contain value. So that's what I'm looking for inside that value. See if it exists. Value in the field row. Again, changing everything in this case. Another thing we can do is just highlight this, use Control F, look for anything that says label and change it to value. That's another way to do it. Okay, and then replace all, and then replace 3 replacements. So that's another way to do it. If there's more, it saves a lot of time. Okay, so we're going to focus on field values, and then of course we're going to say values and values. That doesn't work here. Remember, replace that one. Label, okay, labels and values. Okay, so because it replaced that, duplicate ID card value, we're going to go over it. ID card value, we're going to set the field shape to value. Then we're going to focus on the field shape, but of course it's not focused on B. Remember, where's our values? Our values are now located in CA, so all we need is change it to CA. So we can do that, it's just the 8 times there. So again, the left is going to be CA, CB, CC, CD, CE, CF, sounds like a song, CG, and CH. That's it. Okay, saving our work here. Okay, so now what we've done is we're going to bring all that in, setting it all up. Okay, that's good. And the last thing, I'm just going to set the field shape to nothing, clear that out, clean that it's up here so we can use it in the future. Here, on here, as we loop through those, I want to make sure that, okay, good. So that looks really good. Let's take a look at that. And then of course, again, I'm going to save it one last time. I'm a frequent saver, especially when we're running a large amount of code. And I want to tie this specific macro. And then of course, we'll fix any bugs that come up. And this is called student ID refresh. And that's going to do it. First thing, what we'll do is we'll refresh it, and I'll assign it to that macro, to this button, this macro to this button and the icon here. Right clicking and assign the macro. And then I'm just going to paste in this. I've already copied it, right? Click OK. All right, let's take a look. Click refresh, debug here. This particular one looks like I forgot the P in there. And I'm going to make sure we remember it in here. There we go. You know that right now. Let's take a look. What else? Formula. Okay, we need to fix this. All right, object, obviously it's not objects. Okay, and the same thing down here, make sure. And I also remembered I forgot to do something. This, right? This one is G. Values are located in G here, our field label, so I did have to also fix that up too. All right, take a look at this. Continuing on, lots of bugs. Here's an issue. What if it's empty? It looks like it's empty. Of course, we can't assign a font size if it's empty, so why don't we just check for that? And let's do it. Let's do a few checks on these font names and font sizes, and these I want to check to see if the current value is empty, then we probably shouldn't add anything to it just in case. So let's do that. Let's run a check. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this, copy this, and I'm just going to write an if statement. If equals 0, or let's just say does not equal 0, then change it. And I'm going to do the same thing for this and this. So we're just checking to make sure that the values aren't 0 if we're updating it. So again, if pasting that in here does not equal 0, then. And I'm going to do the same thing here and then down below as well, because I want to make sure that we actually making sure that there are variables in there. If, again, student BG does not equal 0, then go ahead and make the update there. But if the value is 0, then we can't. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'm going to do the same thing down below too. If does not equal 0, then okay. And I'm just going to copy and paste it and then update the columns. So if then, don't forget the then. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this here. These when I'm going to update the columns there. If students be, I think it's a little bit quicker here, and doing the same thing down here, right here. There we go. And then of course I'm just going to update. These are C, column C here. These 4 here. CG and CH, and the same thing for here, just to make sure that there's a value there. If not, it's going to create an issue. Continuing on, let's take a look, saving that work, running the macro. All right, everything looked finally, no bugs there. Let's take a look. Okay, all right, looks good. I'm going to make sure this shouldn't appear here. Obviously, we don't want the value of this, right? So we need to check if for some reason it's not 101. I want to make sure that we're not running it for the values here, for any field values. So let's check that. So we just have to make sure 101's not there, okay? Not for 101. Delete that, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go inside the code and just check for 101. Inside right here, labels and values or values only, but run a check here. If field row does not equal 101 and, okay, let's try that. I'm going to run that and let's take a look. Okay, that looks really good. Refresh fields, very good. That's just the way I like it. Now there comes the real test. Let's delete these fields and see what we happen. So we've edited, making sure all of our fields. If I clear this out here, deleting all that and click edit ID card and click finish customizing, everything should come back just the way I like it. That's the way I want it. So notice how everything came out just the way it should be. So here's what we're going to do. All we need to do is just clear those out and then just refresh the field. So I'm going to try that here. Let's save it before we do that. And then I'm just going to run it, clearing everything out. I think that background, so we're going to update that. Let's ungroup it here. Edit the ID, go back into the edit mode here, ungrouping it, and we're going to add some things, deleting that, and then deleting this, and now clicking refresh fields, and everything comes back except for the border on this, but that's okay. So we didn't do borders. You can add borders on it, but it seemed a bit much, but you get the point. So we can add the border back in, but that's the only thing we didn't save. Of course, those are more parameters. If you want to go beyond that and add borders in too, you can do that. You can add borders in the database too. We did that in the mentorship. In my invoicing, we had borders and things like that. Okay, so everything returned just the way I like it, just about lined up just the way we had it there. And also, so here's what we're going to do now. Now that we have everything just the way we want, I want to add some conditional formatting in here. I want to know when it's edit mode and not. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this, go into conditional formatting and manage rules, and then we're going to add a brand new rule. So what is that new rule going to be? Based on this, use a formula. If this is false equals false, right? When it's false, I want to color everything. So we're going to give it a format. I'm just going to give it a fill color of our background and a font color, the same thing as our background color here, so that nothing else shows up. You can do borders, but it's a lot more rules, right? So now when we finish customizing, everything's hidden. I like that there. Edit mode, it shows, finish its customizing. And let's just double check. Edit mode, right click on there, go into the format the cells, and we're going to look at the protection here. Locked, unlocked, that's what I want. Finish customizing, right click again, format those cells, go into the protection here, and now we see it's locked. Now, as soon as we protect the sheets, everything's going to be changed. Okay, very, very cool. I'm glad I got to show you that. We've got more. I got those certificates I really want to show you. But before I do that, I need to make sure that when we actually group this, when we say now we got a group, when we change tabs, nothing gets messed up. I need to make sure to hide this student group. And also, we're going to make an update to our student. Let's go ahead and update that. Now, we've got some really cool tabs. The admin tabs are really, really cool. I want to do the student tabs exactly the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to update this and make it look a little bit better and streamline it and show you how we can do that, because we don't need all of this code. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to write a macro called sub, and then called student sub. Let's call it student tab, and then we'll just call it hide all. I want to hide everything in a single, just like we did for the macro. So not stub, sub. Okay. So just like we did for that, I'm going to add that. So what do we want inside this hide all? Well, again, we're going to focus on this. I want to hide all the rows. So I'm going to run this here, hiding everything here. Okay. So that's it. And of course, with the students, we're going to focus on with the student suite. So with students, and you'll see how it's so much easier than I guess I should have done this in the first place. Don't tell anybody. Students, focused on that, and going to hide everything. All those rows that are focused on that, we're going to hide it. We also want to hide all the pictures. So if there's a student picture, I want to hide that too, but there might not be a student picture. So dot shapes, we're going to wrap it on student pick, and then in this case, dot visible equals MSO false, right? We're going to hide that picture no matter what, and then we'll show it on only certain tabs just in case. Now on air. Also, what I want to do is the shapes general info group. We have a group there. So this shape here, the general info group, I want to hide this one here. This is the one I want to hide here. So I'm going to copy that, paste that, and then in this case it's going to be false. We're going to hide that general info group. Also the student ID group, that's the one we just created. So the shapes, the student ID group, that's the name we gave it, dot visible equals MSO false, right? We're going to hide that student group, and as we add more, we're going to hide them more button sets as well. That's going to be it for now. So that's going to hide everything. So what I want to do now is notice we've got things like application screen updating. We're going to write those inside there. So I'm going to copy this here, student all. We're going to go into the students here, into the student sheet here, and make some updates on that, because most of it we can write here. So here's what we've got. So again, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to application, screen updating equals false. Now I'm going to make it true down at the bottom before we finish everything. Application dot screen updating equals true. And then also what I want to do is I want to run the hide all macro. I'm going to paste that in, run hide all macro. We're going to do some more things here since we can get out of that. So also in the student tabs, what else we've done? We've done F3 select. So we've also done B5 as the active column. It's going to copy this. I'm just going to make an updates, and then we're going to go into the students here, and then what I'm going to do is also going to do it down here. Obviously dot range, we don't need the dot, so B5, not the active cell, but in this case it's going to be called the target column. We don't need this. I just copied it and pasted it, and then again, don't need the dot range F3 select. Okay, so now what we're going to do is run it. So now we've got this running all the time. So all we need to do is make the updates on the appropriate student tabs. Back into the student tabs. We don't need this anymore. We do need this. We don't need this anymore. We do need this here. So show that. So it's going to be much easier. And also we don't need any of this. The student picture we do need to show. So we don't need that. Okay, so we've got the student picture in case we do want to show that in case it's available. F3 select, we don't need that anymore here, so we can get rid of that because that's on every tab. So it's going to be a lot less. So there we go. So now all we do need to do is just do the same thing for each tab, but it's going to be much easier. In fact, I can take students. We may not even need this word. So we can do something like, in this case, we're going to show the rows. So this one's going to show. We can get rid of everything else, even here, even the end width. Again, there we go. So the student fees, all we need to keep it really simple. Everything else, much easier, much better. Okay, so that's it. Student, we're just going to simply show these specific rows. Now, if we add in, of course, groups or shapes, we can simply display them if we need to. We're going to do the same thing with the attendance. Again, getting rid of everything, just pasting the students in, showing those specific rows here, getting rid of everything else here. And of course, we'll test it out here and here. And here. Okay, good. I like that. Obviously, it's much better. Here, same thing for here, student tabs. And of course, the ID we do need to show in the group here as well. So also doing the same thing here, just getting rid of this, placing the students here, showing it, and then get rid of everything else. Much clearer, much simpler for you to follow along and for me to do as well. Same thing, the student ID, the only difference is we're going to be adding that picture there. So again, pasting this in here. Again, this is the one we want to show. I'm going to copy this student ID group and making sure that this is going to be true. So copying this and then just going into the student ID here, right here, I'll place it right here, students, and then pasting it in dot shapes visible equals MSC true. Getting rid of everything else here. Okay, there we go. I like that much better. Not all of that too much. Okay, good. So we are moving along really well now. Now we've got a nice streamlined macros. We've wrote it, and then attachments. We're going to do the same thing again. Whoops, got rid of the wrong row. Let's make sure to make these false, and then just going to update these three here. False, right? Hidden equals false. We want to show them. These are going to be showing. We actually want to show. Let's copy this. We're going to be showing the tabs. Yeah, I got to do the right row there. Okay, good. So instead of this, in fact, we're going to change this to attendance. We're going to change this to classes, right? Because no longer attendance. So this is going to be classes. And in classes, we're going to actually show rows. In that case, we're going to show 53 through 74. So let's update that 53 through 74. And also what I want to do is I want to show inside, of course, to show the fees tab. Fees is going to be 30 through 51. 30 through 51. And of course, we also want to make sure that in attachments, we want to make sure that there's going to be 121. We have those here. Here, 122. We can hide all the rows. We don't need that. Screen updating, we don't need that anymore. We don't need just with students. We can copy and paste that, putting the students there. Okay, good. Okay, we can copy and paste this here and putting it here, and then we don't need the students anymore. So getting rid of that as well. All right, so we can get rid of just about everything else on that one. The attachments there, we'll be adding more a little bit later on. Okay, so we're going to show the attachments tab. In this case, we're showing the student ID. We do need to see that ID group. Student tab rows, student ID. Let's see, student ID. And then also the exams and classes. Okay, exams, classes, we need to update the macro on the main page because we just added class. Okay, let's do that. Let's add that in right now, that class there. This is the one that we want to update there, and that's going to be located on the Students tab, right? Because it's no longer attendance, it's now class. So run class tab. That's the one we just updated, that class tab. And the class tab, of course, we want to show, which rows do we want to show on the class? We're going to show 53 through 74. 53 through 74. Exam's going to be 76 through 97. We'll update that. 76 through 97. I got some notes here that's going to help me move it along a little bit faster. All right, I think we're good on that. 99 on the student ID, 99 through 143. 140. I'll double check those numbers to make sure, right? And I think we're good in the attachments. All right, 120, the last one's 120 there on that student ID. And also, let's take a look inside the students again, making sure that we got that. All right, this should be target column, target.column. Okay, again, saving our work. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look, going back in here, and then I'm going to go in here and then just double check on these tabs, making sure that picture's got to be hidden, right? We want to make sure we're on the hide all. We need to hide that student picture. So let's double check that, making sure that we have that on the hide all tabs here. Student how student, right? Student pick visible equals MSO false. That should be working here, but with students, making sure that we have that, making sure that we're hiding all on every single one. That should be student, right? We didn't spell out student pick. That should work just fine. Okay, now taking a look at that, let's take a look. All right, back in here, general info, student pick, classes, exam, ID card looks nice. Attachments. Okay, great. All right, let's get into the admin. I want to show you this really cool certificate. I want to be able to add certificates. So we've got a lot to cover on that. Let's do that under the certificates here, right here. We're going to add that. I'm going to increase this column so we have some more space for those certificates. I want to give it all at least preview. So the idea is I want to click on something and then add a certificate. We've got next week, keep in mind that we do have a little bit more to add on students on the ID card next week. What I want to do is when I make a change to the ID card here, I want to make a change. So when I make a change here, I want those to change here. But what I want to do is I really want to show up here. I want to show you how we can do it from another way. But we'll get to that next week because that's the last thing. It's a little bit longer, but I really want to get to those certificates. So because that's going to take just a little bit of time. So keep that in mind. We'll be taking care of that next week inside these certificates. So the idea is I want to click add a certificate here. And then once it's added, I want to put the name, if we're going to assign a type, the file name. I want to have a preview of that. Now to do that, to get a preview, especially if it's going to be something like a Word document, which we're going to add, I want to make sure that we create a preview, like a picture preview of that Word document. So the best way to do that is to bring in that Word document as an object and then take a picture of those cells. So the way we're going to do that is we're just going to create another sheet just to help us temporarily. We're going to call it preview picture sheet. So I'm going to create a sheet here and I'm going to call it preview picture sheet. Okay, and this sheet's going to be really nothing. It's going to be a hidden sheet. And in this particular sheet, we don't want to show any grid lines because I just want that picture to show here. I'm going to take a picture of it. And then with that picture, it is that picture we're going to use as the preview. So again, into the developer sheet, I'm just going to assign the same name as that. So inside here, sheet 1 here, what we're going to do is go into the properties and also, again, give it that same name, preview picture sheet. That's going to help us when we're displaying that. Okay, also inside there, I'm going to add a new module, insert module, and this module I'm going to call, let's call this admin certificate macros. Okay, that's fine, macros. Okay, and inside this we're going to write a few macros that are going to help us with this. And first thing we need to do is browse for a Word document because that's what I want to do. So back into the admin sheet, what we're going to do is we're going to add just a little button to create those certificates, to browse for them. So we can add anything that we've done. So let's go into the students and just going to copy this button here and these two kind of work together. So I'm going to click on this and just update that and modify that. And then I'm going to go back into the admin. I'm just going to paste them right in here. We're going to call this, again, we need to call this, let's call this add certificate, certificates, awards, or anything like that that you want to create. We're going to make them customizable. Again, I don't want to make sure that no macro is assigned just yet. Once we create it, then we're going to assign the macro. Okay, so we're going to call this add certificate. And of course, it could be awards or anything else. Add certificate. Now, once we have that, what I want to do is I want to then create the macro like browse. Basically, we're going to call it browse for certificate. And that's going to allow them to add a certificate. And then we're going to be able to preview that certificate. So let's write some macros now, but I want to make sure that we dimension some variables first before we do that. So dimension, we're going to need the file path. as a string. Also, we're going to need the new path. We're going to be actually taking these certificates wherever they are and putting them in a brand new folder. So I'm going to need a new path for that. So I'm going to call it new path, also as a string. And also what I want is the file name. I want to know the name of the file. We're going to be needing that as a string. And also the app folder. Let's call this the application folder as a string. We went over that last week. And also the certificate row, to mention the certificate row. What row is it in? As long. And also, I think we're going to probably need a picture shape as a shape. So we're going to mention the picture shape as a shape. And also we're going to need some not shadow format shape. And also we're going to need some file dialog. So to mention the certification file as a file dialog. Also we need some objects. So to mention the object file as an object, and as well as the object FSO. That might come in handy if we need it. Object FSO, file system object, as an object. Okay, so let's write our first macro sub. What we want to do in this case is admin add certificate. Considering an add certificate, now what we're going to do is focus on with the admin sheet. With the admin sheet, that's when we're going to. So again, I want to get that app folder first. App folder is going to be equal to dot range. And then we've already assigned the name range. Last week we went over that, and I'll just go real quick with you. In the formulas, name manager, app folder is equal to P6, and that's located inside our dashboard. Our admin here located in application settings here, P6 right here. That's our app folder wherever we've located. We want to make sure that we have them. We've run a check on that. So app folder, that's a named range there. And also let's go ahead and set their certificate. Set the certificate file is going to equal to the application dot file dialog. In this case, the file dialog is going to be MSO file picker. We want to pick a file, right? So what do we want to do with it? With certain file, we're going to use Word documents. They're really flexible. So let's go ahead and let's give it a title. Title of what is the title of that? I knew something was wrong. So when you start typing in, I want a title. It should show a title. Why isn't it showing? Because I misspelled it right up here. That's important. So as soon as we get that right, now watch when we type in title, notice it comes up. So if you got something, it should be working. It's not. Usually it's because of that. Title is equal to what's going to be. We'll just call it select a word. Let's just call it document, because it could be. We don't know what it's going to be. Not a document to add. Okay. So also want to equals, what is this? Who put that there? Okay, let's go ahead and say the filters. We want to add the filters in. Now the filters, we're going to add a filter, dot add. So this one is just going to be Word document. So let's call it Word documents, any type of Word document. And it could be, let's say, any type of .doc. So we're going to put an asterisk, a wildcard .doc. What else might we have? Might .docx, docx. You could add more, of course, but we'll just put the minimum. And then, of course, we need the asterisk before that. That's important. The asterisk before that could be any name. And then, of course, an asterisk .docm probably. So that's going to cover it. We need one position. Okay. Now, if, just in case they don't select anything, if .show does not equal -1, -1 means when they've selected something, then go to no selection. And down here, we're going to drop down no selection. So now we can continue, assuming that they have. We're going to set the file path. The file path, already a string variable, path is equal to .selected items and then 1. Okay. Now we've set it up. Okay. So end with, we're ready to go. Now what do we want? So let's drop this no selection down way down here, because I want to do a few things before that. And if there's no selection, nothing we can do. Okay. So we've ended with the certification file. We're done with that. We can continue on with our certification row. We want to set a row. I want to know what row are we going to place it in. I've got to know inside our certifications here. I want to push it here. We don't need here. I want to put it right here in BC, but I want to know the first available row here in BC. So I want to know that. So let's do that right now. Add in that, the first available row. So the certification row, a long variable, equals, it's going to be BC, and then we don't need that many, okay? So +1, so that's going to get us the last row of the value. +1 will get us the first available row. Next up, what I want to do is inside, what else do I want to do? Now I want to start placing information. Inside BC, I want to put a default name that the user can change. So .range BC and the certification row. .value is going to equal what? Well, I'm just going to put in some, like I said, some default name. So we're going to do the equals the directory of the file path. This is going to give us that name. I want to know the name of that. So also, I would probably want to do the same thing in BE and let the user put whatever they want inside. Maybe we'll add a drop-down list of types in the future. So BE is going to be the same thing. And also what we want to do is going to be, let's call this the file name. We're going to make the user not be able to change. BE will be locked and BC will be available for the user. So they can give it like call it a friendly name here. And then the file name, this is going to help us locate the file. Okay, once we have that, we want to set that. What I want to do is now I want to take that certificate and I want to move to more of a secure location that can be shared among all the users. So how do we do that? Well, let's set the new path. The new path is a variable. It's going to be equal to the app folder. And also what we want to do is we want to run a check, right? Notice we need to make sure that app folder have that admin miscellaneous browse check for. This is what we went over last week. This is to make sure that we have a correct folder in our path. So I'm going to copy that macro and bring it back here. I'm just going to run that at the beginning. I really want to make sure that we run that to make sure check for accurate application folder. Good. Now that we have that, we've checked for it. So the app folder is going to be the app folder, which we've already defined in a variable here. The app folder and what else? And I want to add in some specific folders, certificates. We'll call it certificates. And okay, and then we'll put it in the backslash again there. So that's going to be it. So we will need to make sure that we're checking. So that's the new path. That's what I wanted in. So now let's check to see if that new path exists. If not, we need to create it. And also, what is that? The new path we have to add onto that. I also want to put the file name onto that and the directory of the file path. So that's the actual file name, the directory of the file path. It just gives us the file name. So that's the new path. We've got that set defined. But let's check. I want to know, does this certificates folder exist? If it doesn't exist, then we need to create it. So how can we check that? Well, let's just go ahead and copy this and use an if-then statement. If directory, and then paste that in there, certificates, and then VB directory, again, equals empty, then we need to create it. Then make directory. In this case, we're going to paste it in. That's going to create that folder. So now it's created just in case it doesn't exist. And then close parentheses. Okay, so now that we've made it, we're ready to simply copy the file path. I want to copy the existing location to the new location. So we can use file copy for that. File copy, and then it gives me file path, comma, new path. Very simple. That's just going to copy it to the new location. Now that we have that, I want to set that row. I want to know what row. We're going to use some conditional format here eventually, but I want to set that row, let's say, to a specific row. So we're going to use, in this case, we'll use B9. We'll call this certification row here, or let's call it selected certificate row. And then we'll put it right here in B9. So I'm going to highlight this, give it that distinct color that we use for our numbers. And then, of course, I'm going to put some borders around it. Okay, so that's where I want to put that certification row, right in B9. So let's do that. Let's assign that the certification row. So dot range B9 equals, and that's important because I need to know what row, what selected certificate should we display, certification row. Okay, very good. So now what I want to do is I want to run another macro, and that macro is going to actually show the preview of that. So let's just browse for that, make sure we have everything right. Let's just pull any document up here. Oh, I think I have a certificate here. It's not going to matter because we're going to delete it in a second. I just want to make sure this portion is working okay. Good. So we've got the name here, everything here. Okay, I'm just going to delete that. But it's working just fine. Now what I want to do is I want to put that preview. I want to get that preview of that certificate right in here and put it in there. So our next macro is going to be able to take care of that for us. So what's that macro going to be called? We'll call it, let's call admin show certificate thumb. So let's scroll down here at sub admin. Everything starts with admin. Show certificate thumbnail, certificate thumb. And it is that exact macro that we're going to also run as soon as we browse for a file, right? So as soon as we browse for that word and put it in. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it obviously above the no selection. So I'm going to paste it there. So that is the macro we're going to write right now. So what do I want to do on this? In this case, again, I want to run that folder check. I need to, again, make sure we're folder checking just to make sure. So I'm going to copy this. I'll copy all of it. Copy it, paste it down here. Okay, again, with the admin sheet, that's what we're going to be focused on. And I want to we're going to create some thumbnails and we're going to create two different thumbnails, a word object and a thumbnail. So let's do that. On air, resume next in case they don't exist. So with, we have a new sheet called previous picture sheet. There, in that case, I want to delete some shapes there in case they exist. So we're going to call this the word object in that sheet. That sheet is where we're going to place it, but just temporarily. .delete. But I want to delete it if there's any there. I want to delete it. Also on our current sheet, I want to delete anything that's called thumb. We're going to call it thumbnail picture or thumb picture. .shapes thumb pic .delete. Deleting that too. Okay. If they don't exist, it would create an error. So again, on air, and then we'll wrap that around. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that now. So we're going to focus on that. So again, let's turn application screen updating off. Application dot screen updating equals false. And again, turning it back on before we end the macro. So I'll put that down here. Application dot screen updating equals true. Okay, so inside this is where we want to place that, all that works. So again, let's go ahead and focus on that certification row. Certification row is going to equal whatever's in B9, make sure that we have a value there. If for some reason it's empty, we probably should exit the sub. So let's just put that caveat in there. If B9 equals empty, then exit sub. Nothing we can do unless we have an actual row. Okay, so let's do that. Let's check there. Now we've got I'm going to set the file path. What is that file path going to be? File path is going to be equal to, if that were the app folder, we can use the brackets on this one, app, or we can use the app, either one, variable or app folder. App folder, we can use the brackets, the name range. And remember, we have it already here. What is it? It's this one right here, certificates right here. So that's going to be, and the certificates, and what else? And we need the name of that, right? It's going to be, where's that name located? It's going to be located right here. That file name is going to be located right here in BE in the certificate row. So let's add that in, and dot range BE and the certificate row dot value. Okay, so that's going to be our actual file path. Okay, so but now I want to check to make sure that it's in an accurate file path. So if directory, let's put that in, checking to make sure it's accurate, file path VB directory equals empty, then what are we going to do? Then let the user know. Then message box, please browse for a certificate, or check with admin. Check, in case they don't have that, check with admin. Maybe the file was moved. Admin, the file may have been removed. Okay, removed. Can't type today. Exit the sub. Nothing we can do unless we actually have a valid directory. We can't open anything. Okay. So, and then and if there, and if. Continuing on, now we know we have a proper file path, proper directory, we can focus on that. So let's set it up. I want to create inside this sheet, I want to create that Word document. I want to put it right here. I want to put that document as an object right in here. So let's do that right now inside the code. So we're going to focus on that preview picture sheet dot, here we go. We're going to create dot OLE object dot add. What are we going to add here? I want to add a file name. We're going to add the file name. File name is going to be equal to what? The file path. File path. What else do we want? Well, I want to know if there's a link on it. So we're going to give it a link is going to be equal to, in this case, false. We don't want the link here. Also, I want to display as an icon. No, false. I want to display the whole thing, not as an icon. Display as icon. Let's title that up. Display, so we can see it as icon. That's better. Equals, of course, in this case, false. We don't want to display it as an icon. And also I want to give it a name. What is that name is going to be equal? Let's call it Word object. The same thing that we gave it up there that we're deleting. Okay, so now what we can do is now we can work with it with, again, the preview picture sheet dot shapes. We can work with it. Which shape? The Word object. We want to do, first of all, I want to lock the aspect ratio equals MSO true. I want to lock it so that it doesn't change the aspect ratio. I want to put the left position, set the left position equal to pretty much A1. Left equals, again, previous picture sheet dot range A1. Set it right at A1. It makes it easier. Dot left, on the left of A1. And then also the top position is going to be the same, but just the top also in A1. So I'm going to copy that, paste that down, and change that to the top position. And also, again, the top here. Okay, but what about the width? Let's set the width maybe at around 500, but we could probably just leave it as is. But maybe let's try not setting a width, just seeing what happens, and then putting dot visible equals MSO true. And then anyway, so that's it. So that's just going to display it however it came in is fine, because what I'm going to be able to do is probably determine the last cell that it's displayed and then change the picture, because we're not going to display this one. We're going to display just a thumbnail of it. So now what do I want to do? Now what I want to do is I want to set the range here. So again, focus on that preview picture sheet dot range. And then of course we're focused on A1. I want to copy that picture, A1. And what? I want to find that last. And again, let's focus on the last right cell. Let's get it in there. So this is going to be, I'm going to copy this of this item here. This item, in this case, I want to go bottom right cell. I want to know what the bottom right cell is. That's what I want to do. I want to create a picture based on that range there. Dot copy, in this case, copy picture. Copy the picture. Then we're going to add do events. It's going to let us continue on, do events, and then dot paste. I want to paste that in there. And then with that selection, now that we've pasted, we've created a picture, we've copied it. So now with the selection dot, I want to give it a name. Selection dot name equals thumb pick. That's where our picture is. Okay, so there we go. So now we've created a copy of it and we've created a name on that. So once we have that, I want to then focus on just that one. I want to display that inside the admin. So basically, this copied the picture here. This pasted that picture inside the admin. Dot paste, notice, inside the admin. Then what we've done is we've assigned a name to that. Now, once we have a name, we can work with it. And what are we going to be working with? We got too many end widths here, don't we? Let's get rid of that one. Okay, so now we've created, so now we can focus specifically on that picture. So specifically on that picture, we need to size it and position it exactly where we want it. It's already inside our admin. Now all I need to do is just size it here based on BF6. So let's go ahead and paste that in. So with dot shapes, which shape? Thumb pick. Now we can place it. Now we can space it in. So what do I want to do? Dot left is going to be equal to the admin. We need to specify the sheet again. Admin dot range BF6, BF6, that's the top left cell. Dot left, maybe not exactly on dot left, let's say +5 here. And then also the dot top is also going to be equal based on the admin and dot range BF, also BF6. And then a dot top plus maybe also 5. So that's going to be a little bit off of the top. Okay, also what I want to do is I want to give it a formula. Now this formula is going to be directly based on whatever is located inside our automatic. Inside, it's going to give it that, link it up to that picture. You're going to link it. That's what I'd like to do, link it. So how do we do that? So we can use drawing objects once again. So dot drawing, I wish it would come up in IntelliSense. Drawing objects dot formula. And what is that formula? It's going to be equal to, again, let's put it in here. Our previous, here's the special formula that we're going to add in. Preview, picture, long training, sheet, and then parentheses, and then mark here, then exclamation mark, and then of course we started it in A1, A, and then 1, and then it's all the way to, remember the last formula, and in quotation, and also, of course, it's that exactly this one right here, copy this, and this one here, that's the bottom right picture, the bottom right cell. That's all we need, is the bottom right cell. That portion of it is all we need. So that's going to give us the formula that's going to link that brand new shape directly inside that. Going to give us that nice preview of that thing. And so, but what I want to know is I want to know the address of that dot address. Right? I want to know the bottom right address, and up here as well too. That's important too. Bottom right cell dot address. So just the cell itself, but I need to know the address of that. There we almost forgot that. Okay, continuing on. So also want to do is I want to lock the aspect of this one too. So dot lock aspect ratio equals true, locking that up. And maybe we'll set a width on this one. So let's say the width is equal to, right on, maybe equal to, let's say 450 or something like that. And with application screen updating true. Right, and then now let's take a look at this. And if, I don't think we need this end if here. I don't know where that came from. We're going to find out. Okay, so end with we need. Let's take a look at that. Double check here. And if and end if here. If here empty, then exit the sub. We've got that. Yeah, we don't need an end if here. So if and end if, with and end with, making sure we're having it with and end with here, and end with is based on the sheet. Okay, again, saving our work here. Let's take a look at that. Let's run that macro. Let's add a certificate here. Assign the macro. We should do that. So again, assigning the macro. Again, we're focused on admin certificate awards here. Certificate. Add certificate here. That's the one I want. Add certificate. Click on that. We're going to add that certificate here. Click OK, and we'll take a look and see what happens. All right, no locking aspect ratio. All right, maybe we need to show that on that. Continuing on, let's take a look at that. Okay, that looks better. Okay, there we go. Yeah, we didn't need to lock. Here's the previous. Here's what it looks like. We didn't need to lock the aspect ratio on that. It's an object, so we didn't need to do that. Inside the admin, very good. Now we've got our certificate. It's not in the best position. We can reduce it around, but there it is. Our certificate's showing up. And so basically what we'll do in the future trainings, when we select on our certificate, it's going to show up here. Now our certificate's showing up here. Our previous is actually here, and also our picture preview is there. So we've got it all. Now the certificates are showing up. Very, very cool. We've got a lot covered in this training. We did a lot. We took care of our students. We took care of a lot of ID cards. I showed you how to dynamically create these based on a single specific macro and how to save all the information. We added the customizing and finished customizing, and also we updated the tabs on the student. So we covered a lot. It's been a big training. I can't wait. Week 6 is going to be tremendous. We're going to put all of this together, and we're going to start adding on teachers. It's going to be fantastic. Thank you for following. Thank you so much for your likes, your shares, your comments. I appreciate them all. To help us out, if you want 175 of my best workbooks, it's just $66. I hope you go ahead and pick that up. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.